Hi everyone, welcome to part 2 of feather painting. If you are new to this, then you need to go and look back at our introduction to feather painting, which you can find on my channel, because today we are going to paint some feathers of birds that you might spot around you. In the UK, that is. We're going to do a woodpecker, a guinea fowl and a mallard. So grab your paints and let's get started. So here we are, looking at real feathers today, and just look at the beauty of this little feather we found on the ground in our garden that came from the tail of a woodpecker. I know that Ant right now will be cursing me for not specifying the exact type of woodpecker this came from. I'm afraid I'm not an expert ornithologist, but I appreciate the beauty of birds, so just to show you some of the amazing patterns that you can find probably just sort of floating around in the grass. If you look carefully, you'll spot a few of these feathers. So today we're going to look at 3 really beautiful and very different feathers that come from real birds. The first one is a duck feather from a mallard, and of course the ducks have the most beautiful, almost like petrol blue coloured feathers, but there's a lot of sort of variation in them, and so I thought this would be a really fantastic exercise to show you a feather that's not so much got lots of pattern on it, but it's got a range of really vibrant, strong colours. And so we're going to begin with some French ultramarine. I've drawn a central line here, and what I'm going to do, and I'm going to use my size 8 brush as opposed to the really massive brush, because I think I want more control here. And I'm going to come down one side of my feather in these sort of almost like very flattened out S-curve strokes, really making a huge effort to create some kind of featheriness in the brushstroke I am creating. It already, in a very sort of simple manner, is building that kind of lovely ebb and flow in the way that a feather unfurls out from the quill. And quite quickly we're going to add in a little bit of black, but I'm going to use my size 2 brush now, and I want to blend that black in to get that petrol blue colour I was talking about. Now I'm also going to swipe some black up the edge, and then I'm also, with the same brush but just cleaned off, I'm going to start sort of smoothing and refining the edges there just to get a slightly more delicate finish. Now what I'm aiming for to show you with the mallard feather is that you can get these sort of almost like colour blocking panels on some certain feathers where they have this very strong colour that sort of stays put almost, and then it blends down into a sort of faint grey white downy feather. So we're just sort of drawing down the colour that we had into almost nothing. Now sort of towards the top and over the other side there is an almost kind of imperceptible kind of browny grey, almost like a white colour I suppose, but it's very faint. There's not a huge amount of actual colour in there. So I'm mixing this kind of shadowy colour. It's very translucent. It's a brown and blue. I am also going to put a tiny bit of yellow ochre in there just to warm it up a fraction, but essentially we just want a really translucent kind of grey colour. And what I'm going to do is, with my slightly smaller brush, because I want sort of the control of it, I'm just going to start to sort of shape the top there and draw some of that darkness up into it, because that's where we're going to get a lot of our sort of definition, is by drawing it down into the black just there. And then I want to be really careful that I don't disturb my central line too much. So now I'm going to take a little bit of Mars Black and start to come down the other side. And I want to just keep on softening the outer edge. Drawing it down to the point where I feel like I've got enough control where I can up the size of my brush and start to bring this kind of shadowy colour down in. Always following the line of the feather and then coming down there. So it feels like you sort of start with the big brush strokes and then you go back and finesse. And then further towards the base, we get reintroduced to the black. And if your feather has dried, no problem, you can just add a little bit of water with a clean brush to just draw it back in, to get it back involved. I think the biggest challenge with feather painting is to manage your time, to create the lovely sort of loose blends and then also be able to sort of control what's going on as well. And then as I get towards the bottom, I can now start to actually make something of the bottom of the quilt. And then have these lovely little downy feathers, just using the paint that's already there. And that is a really nice sort of basis for this mallard feather. But what I want to do is we want to get a little bit more detail in there. So the good news is these feathers really do dry quite fast, which allows us to not have to wait around too much to add more detail. But what I'm going to do to start off with is I want to sort of just draw in a bit more colour, a bit of fluff on my brush, and a sort of slightly broad brush stroke coming down in there. So it's almost like sort of creating a bit of a shadow, maybe. I'm not coming from the centre, I'm coming from down from outside the outer edges. And I want to create almost like a smooth, the way the sort of feather hits the light, a glossiness maybe. And I can do that there as well. So you see what I mean? You just get that kind of slightly sort of shine element to it. And then also I am going to add a little bit of feathery detail from this side. So I'm going to start with the black, and I've got a size 4/10 brush here. So I painted a little line there, and then using what that gives me onto the page, just sort of dragging it out. I'm not sort of painting lines like that, I'm just sweeping the brush, and whatever comes with me on the brush, then that's grand. And this is just another way of adding a little bit of extra depth to create that glossiness on the feather, whilst also adding to the detail. You could always bring a tiny bit down in, but we don't want to overdo it, do we? Okay, so then on the other side, a really, really, really thin line. Particularly from the base where there is a bit more darkness. And there we go, that is my sort of fairly loose interpretation of a feather belonging to a mallard duck. Okay, so we are now going to move on to the lovely spotty woodpecker, and I've got a really fun way of creating those white spots. To paint this woodpecker feather, I'm going to begin with that central line, and then I am going to very carefully cover my large rounded point brush. You could use a mop brush, it's fine. We just want one big stroke of colour, so I'm using black and then tail it off. It's a very smooth feather, and then I'm going to just show you first just this one side, the way we're going to achieve these amazing black spots, and white spots, I beg your pardon. I've just sort of balled up a bit of kitchen roll here to make a nice sort of point, and I'm going to very purposefully press quite hard, and look at that, not bad, eh? Right, let's do the other side. I get excited by the most minuscule things, and so should you too, quite frankly. I think that's a really fantastic little hack, because I personally I'm not that into using masking fluid to create sort of white marks and things on my page. I prefer finding ways to do it a bit more manually. So there we go. And let's turn it over again. Okay. So I'm pressing quite hard. There we go. I'm so thrilled with that. I could just quit now, frankly. Don't think it's ever going to get any better than that. So let's just pop that little feather on there. So I've just got a teensy bit of yellow ochre mixed in with some shadow there. We don't want much, but I just want to do that. And I am going to stop that feather right there because I think that is gorgeous. Right, on to the last one. We're going to do a guinea fowl. So I don't have a guinea fowl feather. This is actually a pheasant. But what I want to do is have a go at one of these really sort of curly, cute, teeny weeny ones, and look at how we get the really sort of fluffy downiness and how we can achieve not quite the stripe, but we're going to look at speckles. So we're going to be looking at this wonderful blotting technique once again. So once again, a bit of pencil for my final feather. I'm also very aware whenever I draw my curves, I am left-handed, so it's much easier for me to paint them this way, but all these feathers will lend themselves to a right-handed curve, so just remember that's just your choice depending on what hand you use. Right, got my size 8 brush and I am going to get some yellow ochre. Tell you what, I am still riding high off the success of that woodpecker. It's amazing how, The satisfaction actually of the small things in watercolour is one of the reasons why I keep coming back again and again, and I hope you are getting the same small victories when you are painting these pieces, because yeah, it's all about sort of creating your own little world of calm with watercolour. I can't stress that enough. Okay, so I've got a lovely sort of quite a cool brown mix. It's a mixture of a bit of yellow ochre, a bit of burnt sienna, and then some of our blues, a bit of Prussian blue and a tiny bit of Mars black that's just lurking in here. But we're using it in a very dilute manner, and I will also be sort of just dropping in a few other sort of browns and things as we go. But let's begin. So I'll start by coming on around the outer edge, remove that bit of fluff. So sort of cozy up to my pencil curve and working quite fast. So this is going to be quite a sort of broad little feather, and I use my little brush to get plenty of delicate little fine lines coming off the edge, and then a little bit of burnt sienna just for a little bit more colour, and then coming down that burnt sienna, just creating a bit more colour. And I'm going to begin by just dabbing in some very wet, very blended dabs of the burnt sienna around the top there. We want them to spread, we want them to fan out. And then, I'll get my little trick in a sec. I need a bit more of a cooler, deeper colour. We're building up, our colour's working quite quickly. Now here's a darker colour. Building up all this texture. Because what we're going to do is we're then going to blot it. So just taking the colour off the brush a tiny bit. Okay, so the way I'm going to do little speckles, and I've got a little technique here where I've got some kitchen roll, you could use tissue, loo roll, round the end of one of my smaller brushes, and I'm really going to try and pinch it, and then it's a little bit sort of a job to do, but I'm just getting the faintest little speckles by blotting the brush. It's not a huge amount, but it's just creating these funny little textures on the feather there. So we'll go back to creating a bit more texture. So now I've got a bit more burnt sienna, and I'm really drawing up those feathery lines, and then I have a few that sort of not just following the line, they're curving out. And the beauty of this is because the feather, the body of the feather is still quite wet, it's blending in rather nicely. Okay, so we're going to now repeat this on the other side. So there's quite a few steps to this one, but don't worry. Let's go again. So we're going to leave that central line, and then really sort of thin it down towards the bottom, but broaden it out towards there, and then using what we've got already, then we start to build up our colours on either side. few dabs. And you could do a few on the other side when it's sort of dried and get a bit more texture. It's quite nice. Getting distracted. I just get so excited by painting these feathers. I'm a bit obsessed at the moment. I think it's because it's spring and we're starting to see all the birds gathering around the bird feeder. It's just so nice to see them all. I mean, they've been here all winter, to be honest, but they've been sort of huddling up and keeping warm, keeping themselves to themselves. This time I might try just going in with just my hand on a little spot. It's quite nice. So you're getting a sort of mottled texture. Get these little speckles. And that's looking absolutely lovely. Now, what we need to do is to get a bit more sort of definition of the feathery lines, because with these feathers you can see, because they're all quite wayward and fluffy, there's actually a little bit more sort of air between each little feather line. So with a small brush I want a sort of cool brown, so I'm going to pop black and brown together and also dab off whatever's on my brush just to start off with. It still might be quite wet. And I really like how that just starts to cut through some of the dapples and just starts to look really crisp and gorgeous. I mean, this is very much my sort of artistic interpretation. I don't sort of claim that this is anywhere near to a sort of accurate botanical study, but they are very much inspired by the real deal, rather than just painting feathers of all sorts of all colours and patterns. I think it's nice to sort of wonder at nature itself, and it's all there in front of us, all the beauty. So yeah, we're just sort of continuing to build up the layers, and all the while keeping an eye on the definition of that central feather line. So I'm just going to complete this the other side and then we'll come back and have a look. And there we have a lovely example of one of those far more fluffy feathers where you can start to see all the separate little fronds coming off from the central quill. So I really hope that you are inspired to maybe go and look out in the garden or on the street and just see if one of these little pieces of treasure is waiting for you to come and pick it up and paint it. Thanks so much for watching. I really enjoy feather painting. I find it quite addictive, to be honest, so I really hope that you get to paint feathers all day to your heart's content. I want to say a big thank you to my patrons for their support, because this support enables me to keep creating these videos that everyone can enjoy. And if you enjoyed it, then hit the like button below and comment to let me know how you're getting on. And of course, if you subscribe, then you will never miss another video. Until next time, bye!